The thing about charity events is nobody really looks at anyone. You walk in, you sign the waiver, you grab your free tote bag, and you find your station. Everyone's smiling, but nobody's seeing. There's a particular kind of busyness that functions as armor. You're doing good, you're moving, you've got somewhere to be. Nobody has to be present. Nobody has to make eye contact that lasts longer than a second and a half. That's why I went. That's the honest truth of it. Not because I'm a good person. Not because I woke up one Saturday morning in March with a burning need to serve lunch to strangers at the Northgate Community Shelter. I went because my therapist, a small, relentless woman named Dr. Priya who charges too much and is always right, told me I needed to be somewhere that wasn't my apartment for at least 4 hours every weekend. You're not a hermit, Rowan, she said at our last session. You're a person who has convinced himself that solitude is the same thing as safety. I didn't argue. I never argue with Priya. I just sign the receipts and nod. So I googled volunteer opportunities, single Saturday, no commitment. Found the Northgate Winter Warmth Drive. Filled out the form at midnight on a Thursday. Showed up at 9 in the morning on a gray, indifferent Saturday with a paper coffee cup and absolutely zero expectations. The shelter was on a street that couldn't decide what it wanted to be, half gentrified, half holding its ground. Bricked old buildings next to a smoothie place. A hardware store that had been there since the 70s, its sign sun-bleached into something barely legible. I parked on the street, fed the meter more coins than the morning deserved, and pushed through a glass door with a handwritten sign taped to it, Warmth Drive volunteers, check in upstairs. The stairs were narrow. The kind that creak specifically to embarrass you. I went up them slowly, coffee in hand, collar of my coat still turned up even though I was inside now. Old habit. I'd been turning my collar up since I was 16, like it might hide me. At the top of the stairs was a folding table. A banner. Balloons red and yellow tied to either side, cheerful in the way that only inanimate objects at charitable events can be. And, behind the table, a woman with a clipboard, a phone tucked between her ear and shoulder, and the particular energy of someone who has already solved 4 problems before 9 in the morning and is currently solving a 5th. She was talking fast, nodding at something the phone was saying, and simultaneously writing something on the clipboard, and simultaneously handing a lanyard to a volunteer who'd arrived before me, all without looking up. I waited. She said, "No, the canned goods should be on the left side of the hall, not the right, because the right side is where we're doing the shoe fitting and someone will absolutely trip over a box of chickpeas." "Tariq, I'm serious," she laughed then. At whatever Tariq said back. And that's when I heard it. Not a sound. Not a word. Just a laugh. Short, a little uneven at the end, rising slightly before it cut off, like she'd thought better of letting it go fully. I'd heard that laugh before. Not recently. Not in any context I could immediately name. But, somewhere in the basement of my memory, something moved. She finished the call. Clicked her pen. Looked up. "Hi. Welcome, are you a returning volunteer?" or she stopped. Not rudely. Not dramatically. Just a fraction of a second where the sentence went somewhere she hadn't expected. Or knew. She finished it. Smiled. Professional. Present. New, I said. Great. She was already scanning her list. Name? Rohan Mehta. Pen moving. Finding the name. Ticking it. Perfect, Rohan. I'm Zara, I'm coordinating today. We've got you in the meal station, second room on the left. You'll be working with a guy named Faraz and a woman named Claire, they're both lovely, they'll show you the setup. She handed me a lanyard. Blue. Volunteer printed on it in white block letters. Thanks, I said. I took the lanyard. I did not put it on immediately because I am 31 years old and still find lanyards mildly humiliating. I walked toward the second room on the left. And then stopped. Turned back. She was already on the phone again, already writing, already solving the 6th problem of the morning. The room had that particular quality of March light, thin, watery, trying its best through windows that needed cleaning. Zara. I stood there in the hallway for long enough that a woman carrying a box of blankets had to say excuse me to get past me. I moved. Found my station. Found Firaz, who was cheerful and loud and immediately tried to teach me a handshake. Found Claire, who was quietly efficient and handed me an apron without making a fuss about it. I tied it on. I started chopping onions because that was the task in front of me and because it gave me a reason for whatever was happening to my face. Zara. I hadn't heard that name in 15 years. Here is what I knew about Zara Ahmed when I was 16 years old. She sat 3 rows ahead of me in Mrs. Qureshi's English class at Greenfield Secondary. She had the kind of handwriting that made teachers write beautiful work in red pen and mean it. She ran the school's charity committee, some kind of food drive, I think, every November, and she took it embarrassingly seriously for a 16-year-old, in the way that only people who will actually amount to something ever do. She had that laugh. The one that cut itself off, like she was keeping it from taking over. And she had absolutely no idea I existed. Not in a cruel way. Not in the way of someone who looked at you and decided to unsee you. More in the way of someone whose world was fully populated and I wasn't in it. I was background. I was furniture. I was the boy in the back of the English class who read too much and said too little and went home every day to a house that was louder and smaller than it needed to be. I don't say this with bitterness. I say it the way you talk about the weather in a year that's already passed. It was what it was. I was what I was. 16, acne-haunted, drowning in a family situation I didn't have the vocabulary for yet. The kind of kid that a girl like Zara, organized, purposeful, already 3 steps into becoming who she'd be, wouldn't have had reason to clock. I was not bullied. I was simply not noticed. There's a particular loneliness in that. Different from being targeted. Quieter. The kind that doesn't give you a story to tell at parties. I left Greenfield at the end of year 11. My family moved, not far, just far enough that I transferred schools, started over, became someone slightly different in the way you can when nobody carries the original version of you in their head. I finished school. Did reasonably well. Went to university in Edinburgh. Came back to the city 3 years ago for work, for reasons that were professional and, for other reasons I still explain badly. And, now here I was. Chopping onions in the Northgate Community Shelter while Zara Ahmed, 15 years older and running the whole operation with a clipboard and a second-hand phone, moved in and out of the kitchen doorway like she owned the air in the building. Which, for today at least, she kind of did. Firaz was telling me something about his sister's wedding. I was listening. Mostly. Claire was portioning soup into trays with a precision that made me feel inadequate about my own ladle technique. The smell of the kitchen was the good kind, onions softened down, something with cumin, bread warming somewhere. The door swung open. Okay, meal team, we're opening the main hall in 40 minutes, I need the first trays ready in 30, is that doable? Firaz said, for you, Zara, anything. She pointed at him without looking up from her clipboard. That's what you said last week about the blanket station and, then, we ran out of XL sizes. That was Tarek's fault. Everything is Tarek's fault, according to you. Tarek is one person. She was already scanning the kitchen, the trays, the pots, the prep. Her eyes moved the way a general's eyes move over a field. Fast. Taking stock. Looking good in here. Who's the new face? A half second. Firaz hadn't answered yet. Rohan, I said. She looked at me properly then. The way she hadn't at the check-in table, because there she'd been on the phone and I'd been a name on a list. Now I was a person in an apron holding a ladle. You've done this before, she said. Not here. Some volunteer work in Edinburgh, years ago. You're comfortable with the serving line? Yeah. Good. Firaz will show you the positioning. We do seated service here, people come to the tables, we bring to them. It keeps the dignity in it. She said that last part plainly. Not like she was reading it off a poster. Like it was something she'd decided a long time ago and stopped needing to justify. She made a note on the clipboard. Left. Claire looked at me with the mild amusement of someone who'd been watching Zara operate for long enough to find it quietly spectacular. She's like that all day, she said. Never stops. But she remembers everything. Ask her what table 7 had for lunch 2 weeks ago, she'll tell you. I didn't say anything. I went back to the ladle. The hall opened. People came in from the cold, older men, a few young women with children balanced on hips, a teenager who came in alone and sat at a corner table and looked at his phone with the intensity of someone pretending not to be somewhere difficult. The room filled with that particular kind of noise, not loud, not cheerful, not sad. Just human. The sound of people who were tired in the ordinary ways of tired. I served. I moved. I said here you go and enjoy, and once, when a small girl tugged my apron and pointed at the bread rolls with enormous seriousness, I gave her 2 and felt like I'd done something that mattered, which is a feeling I am deeply suspicious of in myself but couldn't argue with in the moment. Zara moved through the room the way she'd moved through the kitchen, purposefully, without performance. She stopped at tables. She knew names. She crouched down to talk to the girl's mother like she had all the time in the world, which she absolutely did not, and somehow made it feel true anyway. I watched her the way you watch something you're trying to solve. At one point she caught me looking. I looked away first. Went back to the bread basket. By the time lunch service wound down and we were on cleanup, my feet hurt and my lower back had opinions, and Firas had told me the entire history of his sister's engagement, and I had, against all reasonable expectation, had a decent morning. I was rolling up an apron when Zara came into the kitchen one last time, clipboard down, phone in her pocket, the particular relief on her face of someone who has gotten through the thing they were in charge of without it going wrong. Good work today, she said. Addressed to the room. Then, specifically, to me, you're a natural on the serving line. Low bar, I said. She smiled. Lower than you'd think. We've had people cry. She started toward the door. Paused. Turned back. You're coming back next week? I hadn't decided that. Maybe, I said. She nodded. Like maybe was a beginning and she knew it. Then, she was gone, back down the creaking stairs, out into the gray March Street, and I stood in the kitchen with a rolled-up apron and a chest that felt strange in a way I hadn't earned and couldn't name. She has no idea, I thought. No idea that we sat in the same classroom for 2 years. No idea that I used to watch her run the November food drive and think, distantly, like watching something through a window, that she would probably be doing this, exactly this, for the rest of her life. No idea I existed then. And no real reason to know it now. I hung my apron on the hook. Took my coat. Went down the creaking stairs. Fed the meter. Drove home. Sat in my apartment for 20 minutes without turning the lights on. Then, I opened the volunteer app and signed up for the following Saturday. I came back the next Saturday. And the one after that. By the 4th week, Firas had upgraded me to a full handshake with a shoulder pat at the end of it, which I understood to be significant. Claire had started saving me the good apron, the one without the fraying left string, without being asked. The teenager who came in alone and sat in the corner had graduated to sitting at a table with 2 other people, which I noticed and said nothing about because some things you just quietly witness. And Zara had started talking to me like I was someone she knew. Not dramatically. Not in the way of a friendship forming, with its attendant awkwardness and negotiated boundaries. More the way you start to trust a piece of furniture, you stop thinking about whether it'll hold before you lean on it. She'd come through the kitchen with a problem. She'd say, Roland, tell me honestly, does that rice look done to you, or are we about to give 50 people something to complain about? And I'd taste it and tell her. And she'd make a face and give it another 8 minutes. Or she'd stop in the doorway after service and debrief, not formally, just verbally processing. The things that went right. The things that didn't. The new family she'd had to find a translator for, the donation that came in late, the one volunteer who kept disappearing for 30-minute intervals and coming back smelling of cigarettes. I can't be angry at him," she said one afternoon. We were in the hallway between the kitchen and the main hall, both leaning against opposite walls because our feet had given up on vertical ambition. "He's here. He's showing up. That's the whole thing." "That's a generous read," I said. "It's a pragmatic one." She looked at the middle distance the way she did when she was thinking, which was differently from how she looked at the middle distance when she was listening. I'd learned to tell them apart. You know what the hardest part of this is? Not the funding, not the logistics. It's the fact that goodness is messy. People are messy. You can't have a clean version of this. I thought about that for a second. That sounds like something you learned the hard way, I said. She looked at me then. Not in the way of someone caught out. In the way of someone who'd filed that sentence away to think about later. "Probably," she said. Then, her phone went off and she was gone. The fifth Saturday, it rained. Not the gray, manageable drizzle of every other March morning. Actual rain, the kind that makes the streets smell like wet concrete and old decisions. I got to the shelter with my jacket soaked through the shoulders despite the umbrella, which had been useless and ornamental, and I was in a particular kind of mood that happens when the weather is bad and you haven't slept well and you're about to spend 6 hours on your feet. Zara was at the check-in table as usual, except today the table had been moved 3 feet to the left because there was a leak in the ceiling directly above where it normally stood, and someone had placed a blue bucket under the drip, and she was coordinating the morning briefing while simultaneously keeping one eye on the bucket as though she expected it to make a run for it. "We've got extra people coming in today," she announced to the assembled volunteers. 8 of us, damp and caffeine dependent. Rain drives numbers up. Which means we're going to need to be sharper on table turnover, and I need someone to handle overflow in the side room. It's not usually open, but I've got it cleared and set. She looked around. "Rohan, can you run the side room?" Everyone looked at me. "Yeah," I said. "You'll be solo in there. It's smaller, probably 15, 20 people at a time. You comfortable with that?" "Yeah." She nodded. "Done. Moved on." Firaz, beside me, whispered, "She doesn't give the solo rooms to just anyone." "It's a room," I said. "It's a vote of confidence." Firaz. "I'm just saying." The side room was smaller, which meant the sounds were different, more contained, the conversations closer. I got to know the regulars in a way I didn't in the main hall, where the noise spread out and thinned. In the side room, a man named Gerald who wore a specific green scarf every week told me, while I poured his tea, that he'd worked for the Postal Service for 31 years. A woman named B ate everything methodically from left to right on her tray, like she was reading a sentence. A young couple, couldn't have been older than 22, sat close together and split everything without discussing it, in the way of people who've been poor enough long enough that sharing is just grammar. I moved between tables. Refilled cups. Replaced bread baskets. Zara came in once, midway through, to check the numbers. She had that look she got when things were going to plan, not quite satisfied, because satisfaction implied she might stop, but settled. Like the morning had agreed to behave. She counted heads. Made a note. Started to leave. "You can sit," I said. "For a minute." She looked at me. "Nobody's watching," I added. It was almost a joke. She sat down at the empty end of a table near the door, and, for approximately 4 minutes, she was not coordinating anything. She put her clipboard face down on the table. She looked out the window at the rain beating the glass. "Do you ever feel like you started something and you can't figure out where you are in it anymore?" she said. I thought that was a general question. Like this. She gestured at the room. At the walls. "I started this chapter 3 years ago," after she stopped. One of those stops that's a deliberate gait. I needed something that wasn't about me. And it worked. It does work. But sometimes I come in and I don't know if I'm doing this because I want to or because I've forgotten how to want anything else. She said it plainly. Not fishing. Not asking me to fix it. Just saying it, the way you say something out loud because you've been keeping it inside so long it's lost its shape in there. I think the two things can be true at once, I said. She picked up her clipboard. Yeah, she said. Maybe. She left. Back to the main hall. Back to the thing she'd built and couldn't step back from long enough to see clearly. I went back to the bread baskets. The rain kept going. The 6th Saturday. I know. I said maybe. Dr. Priya would have opinions. Firaz greeted me like I'd been away for a year. Claire handed me the good apron without making eye contact, which is a form of affection I've come to rely on. The teenager from the corner table nodded at me across the main hall, the way you nod at someone whose name you don't know but whose presence you file as safe. I was in the kitchen for morning prep when I heard Zara's voice in the hallway, slightly elevated, not angry, but the version of measured that you use when you are working hard to stay measured. I understand the timeline, but we've been running this program for 2 years and this is the third change in funding criteria in 8 months, and I genuinely need you to tell me what the actual target is, because my team is, pause. Yes, I understand. Okay. She came into the kitchen. Went directly to the counter. Put both hands flat on it and looked at the wall for a moment. I was the only one in there. Claire and Firaz were in the supply room. I gave her a second. Funding? I said. She pushed off the counter. Straightened. It's fine. It didn't sound fine from the hallway. It's manageable, she corrected. There's a difference. She tied her hair back, it had come half loose from wherever it had been, and picked up her clipboard. You want the honest version? Sure. The grant we've been running on since last year has changed its eligibility criteria. We might not qualify next cycle. Which means I need to find £12,000 in the next 3 months or we cut services, and cutting services means she stopped. Exhaled through her nose. Anyway. I'll figure it out. I always figure it out. She said that last sentence the way you say something that's been true so many times it started to feel like a threat. I believe you, I said. She looked at me. Something in her face did something small. You're surprisingly easy to talk to, she said. For someone who barely says anything. I say things. Measured things. Considered things. She tilted her head. Were you always like that? The question landed differently than she meant it to. Were you always like that? I could have said yes and moved on. That would have been the sensible answer. The one that kept the morning on its rails. Instead I said, not always. I was different when I was younger. Different how? Quieter. In a less useful way. She accepted that. Made a note on something. Started toward the door. Zara, I said. She turned. I think you went to my school. The silence after that was maybe 2 seconds. Might as well have been a month. She looked at me. Really looked. The coordinator's efficiency dropped away for a moment, not replaced by anything dramatic, just a different kind of attention. The kind you reserve for something that doesn't fit the category you'd put it in. Greenfield Secondary? I said. She blinked. Yeah, I did. Year 10 and 11. Mrs. Qureshi's English class. That's how do you, and then, I watched it happen. The search. The slow archaeology of it. Her eyes doing what eyes do when memory is filing through things in a hurry. Rohan Mehta, I said. She stopped. Went somewhere. Came back. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with, you wouldn't remember me, I said. And, I said it carefully, without edge. Without the shape of an accusation, because it wasn't one. I was in the back. I didn't talk much. We weren't friends. Something moved across her face that I couldn't quite read. Not guilt, exactly. Something more like the feeling of discovering a room in a house you've lived in for years. We were in the same class for 2 years, she said slowly. Yeah. And I didn't know I was there. It's okay. I meant it. I'm not bringing this up to make you feel bad. It's just, it was a long time ago, and I've been meaning to say something for 6 weeks and I kept not saying it, and then, that felt weirder than just saying it. She stared at me. 6 weeks, she said. Give or take. You've known this whole time. Yeah. She put her clipboard down on the counter. Both hands. And she looked at me the way she'd looked at the rain through the side-room window, not solving anything, just watching it. I'm sorry, she said. You don't need to know. I know I don't need to. She said it firmly, but not unkindly. I'm doing it anyway. Because I ran a charity committee at that school for 2 years and I apparently managed to miss an entire person who was sitting 3 rows behind me. Probably not your only one, I said. That doesn't make it better. No. But it makes it human. She looked at me for another moment. Something settling in her expression. The way things settle when you stop fighting them. Rohan Mehta, she said again. Like she was writing it somewhere. That's me. Her phone went off. She didn't answer it immediately. Which, from everything I'd learned about her in 6 weeks, was extraordinary. Then, she picked it up. I have to, I know. She answered it. Left the kitchen. I heard her voice in the hallway, already back to managing, already 3 moves ahead. I stood in the kitchen for a moment. Then, I picked up my ladle. The morning went on, she treated me differently after that. Not in the ways I expected. Not more warmly, exactly, or with the awkward overcorrection of someone trying to compensate for 15 years of not noticing. It was subtler than that. She asked me questions. Real ones. Not the logistical shorthand of the kitchen, does that rice look done, can you run the side room, but questions with more space in them. What were you like at 16, she said one afternoon, when we were both in the side room after service and the last volunteers were clearing up. I thought about it honestly. Frightened, I said. Though I didn't have that word for it then. Of what? Everything. Nothing specific. The kind of frightened where you shrink down into a very small version of yourself and you think if you get small enough, nothing can hit you. She turned a teacup around in her hands. Did it work? At the time. Less useful in your 30s. She smiled at that. Not the professional smile, the one where she cut it off. The real one. Slightly crooked on the left side. I was loud at 16, she said. Annoyingly confident. I had this vision of who I was going to be, and I just charged at it. I didn't look sideways very much. She paused. I know that's not a great thing to admit. It's an honest thing. Same sentence, different angle. She set the teacup down. Were there other people like you? In our class. People I just didn't see. I thought about that. Probably. I can only speak for myself. What would you have needed? From someone like me? I looked at her. I don't think I needed anything from you specifically, I said. I needed someone to see me. Could have been anyone. But it wasn't. No. She sat with that. Not trying to fix it, not performing contrition. Just sitting with it. Thank you for coming back, she said. Every week. Priya would take credit for it. Who's Priya? My therapist. She told me to leave my apartment. Zara laughed, the full version. No cutting it off. It went where it went. Then, Priya should be here, she said. I'll pass on the message. The 7th Saturday brought something I hadn't planned for. It arrived in the form of a woman named Sheila, who worked for a regional charitable trust and had come to assess the Northgate program for potential grant funding. She was efficient in the way of someone who sat through 100 site visits and decided long ago what she was looking for before she walked in the door. She had a folder. She had a lanyard of her own, Observer in navy blue. Zara met her at the door. I watched from the kitchen doorway. The tour took 40 minutes. I know because I was running service during it and tracked them with the peripheral awareness of someone who doesn't want to be caught tracking anything. They moved through the main hall, the side room, the supply corridor. Zara was composed, not performed, not over-explaining. Just accurate. She spoke about the program the way she always spoke about the things she believed in, plainly, without ornament, with the authority of someone who'd earned every word. Sheila asked questions. Wrote notes. Her face gave very little away. I served rice and tried to remember that none of this was my business. Except. At some point midway through service, when the main hall was at its fullest, Sheila stopped near table 3. There was a family there, a father, 2 girls, maybe 8 and 10. The father was talking to the younger one about something. The older girl was drawing on a napkin with a borrowed pen. Sheila watched them for a moment. Made a note. And I thought about what Zara had said weeks ago. We do seated service. We bring to them. It keeps the dignity in it. I went over to table 3 with the bread basket. More bread? I said. The older girl looked up from her napkin. She'd drawn a house. With very specific windows. What's that? I asked. Our flat, she said. The one we used to have. I looked at her drawing. I didn't say anything comforting or fixed sounding. I said, that's a good window. Because it was. She'd done the cross-pane detail in ballpoint. She looked at it critically, like an architect. I need to do the door better. You've got time, I said. I left the bread. Moved on. I don't know if Sheila saw that exchange. I wasn't doing it for her. After the assessor left, I found Zara in the hallway, the in-between hallway, the one that went nowhere specifically, the one we'd started to use like a decompression chamber between the kitchen and the main hall and the weight of everything. She was leaning against the wall. Clipboard face down. Eyes closed. Not sleeping. Just processing. I leaned against the opposite wall. How'd it go? I said. I don't know. She didn't say much. Is that good or bad? With funders, silence is usually bad. She opened her eyes. Looked at the ceiling. I made the case I could make. The numbers are real. The people are real. If that's not enough, she stopped. Then, I find another way. You always find another way, I said. I know. It's exhausting. But, she almost smiled. We stood there for a moment in the particular quiet of that hallway. The sounds of the main hall muffled behind one door, the sounds of the kitchen behind another. Neither of us in either place. Can I ask you something? She said. Yeah. Why did you keep coming back? Before you said anything about school. Before I knew you. She looked at me. Was it the food drive? Was it, I don't know. Was it me? I thought about answering that carefully. The way I usually answered things. Partly, I said. She waited. I recognized you that first day. And, I didn't know what to do with that. So I kept coming back, I think, because I wanted to figure it out. Figure what out? I thought about the boy in the back of the classroom. The one who'd made himself furniture. The one who'd watched a girl run a food drive with the serious conviction of someone who already knew who she was and thought, distantly, that she'd be doing something like this for the rest of her life. Whether it meant anything, I said. Whether anything connects. Whether the person I was then, and the person I am now are part of the same story. She looked at me for a long time. Are they? She said. I think so, I said. I'm still figuring out where. 3 weeks later, Zara's phone rang during prep. She answered it standing by the supply shelf, one hand on a stack of paper cups, and I watched her face do something I hadn't seen it do before, a very specific kind of stillness that happened when she was getting news that required her to be bigger than her reaction to it. She said, "Thank you." "Really?" "Yes. Thank you." Then, she hung up. Firaz looked at her. Claire looked at her. I looked at her. "Grant came through," she said. Firaz made a sound like a small explosion of joy. Claire put down a ladle and clapped, twice, precisely. The kitchen did what kitchens do when something good happens, it got briefly warmer. Zara stood still for another second. Then, she laughed. The real one. The uncut version. She looked at the ceiling. "Okay," she said. To no one specifically. To the room. To whatever force she'd been negotiating with for 3 months. "Okay." She picked up her clipboard. Got back to work. I watched her do it. That evening, a Saturday in late April, the city having finally committed to something that resembled spring, she caught me on the way out. On the creaking stairs. Both of us in our coats, the lanyard still around my neck because by now I'd stopped finding it humiliating. "Rohan." I turned. She was 2 steps above me, which meant we were almost at eye level. The stairwell light was the particular warm yellow of old buildings that haven't updated their fixtures. "I've been thinking about what you said," she said. "About the person you were then, Don't. Let me, Zara. Really. Don't turn it into something you have to carry." She looked at me. "I'm not carrying it. I'm just thinking about it." She shifted. "I think the person who ran that food drive at 16 was so focused on the thing in front of her that she never looked at what was around her. And I think I spent a lot of years being very good at looking at the thing in front of me and very bad at everything peripheral." She said it without self-pity. "Just assessment. I don't want to be like that anymore." I didn't say anything. "So?" She straightened. "I'm saying it now. Whatever late is." "Late is something," I said. "Is it enough?" I thought about the drawing on the napkin. The older girl and her very specific windows. The boy who sat in the back of an English class and made himself small enough to be missed. "I don't know," I said. "But it's a beginning." She nodded. We went down the rest of the stairs, her first, me behind. Out into the April evening, which smelled like cut grass from somewhere and petrol from the road and the specific optimism of a city remembering what warmth feels like. She turned left. I turned right. 10 steps out, she called back, "Same time next week?" "Yeah," I said. "Same time." I didn't tell Dr. Priya for another 2 weeks. When I did, I gave her the whole thing, the check-in table, the gray March morning, the ladle, the creaking stairs, the girl from the English class who'd never known I was there and was now the reason I left my apartment every Saturday with something approaching purpose. Priya listened without interrupting, which she almost never does. When I finished, she said, "And how do you feel?" I thought about it. "Like something that was open got closed," I said. "Or something that was closed got opened. I can't tell which." Priya wrote something down. "Maybe it's both," she said. I thought about Zara standing in the hallway with her clipboard face down, the rain on the side room window, the Grant call coming through, the way she'd looked at the ceiling and said okay and then gone straight back to work. "Maybe," I said. I signed the receipt. Went home. Turned the lights on this time. There's a particular thing that happens when you're seen by someone who didn't see you. It doesn't fix the years where you weren't. But it does something to the shape of them. It makes them a beginning instead of just a record. And that, I've decided, after 31 years of being a person who reads too much and says too little, is enough to keep going on.